When it comes to campus bias, the smaller the campus, the bigger the problem? Next on Campus Roundup. Hello, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is Campus Roundup at the College Fix. Our top story segment this week focuses on the disturbing and increasingly intolerant climate of St. Olaf College, a liberal arts college in Minnesota. To talk more about this, we welcome Catherine Hindraker, a political science major at St. Olaf College in Minnesota and a journalist at the College Fix. Catherine, you have just been round and round and round the bend at St. Olaf, which is a tiny school. Talk briefly about the last couple of years of your experience there.
Yeah, well, things started really getting bad around the election, and we had students, there was a lot of riots and protests and students screaming in the middle of our commons, if you voted for Trump, you better be effing scared, and personally threatening certain students at my school and doing some pretty horrible things. And ever since then, I think the climate really has not gone back to normal and not been very safe for conservative students. We've had many incidents since then of our posters getting torn down, our speakers getting declined by the administration, more threats, more personal harassment online and in person. And it's really, I think, since the election, been a really hard place for conservatives to be on campus.
Sure. And on top of that, you had a racial hoax, didn't you, that sort of fanned the fires. It's amazing to me on these college campuses how angry everybody gets when they think, and maybe justifiably so, how angry people get when they think there isn't discrimination. And yet when they find out that discrimination is faked, there is never any corresponding backing down. Talk a little bit about the supposedly racist note that was found at St. Olaf.
Yeah, so last year in the spring, there was supposedly a racist note that was I believe left on someone's car, but it was found shortly after to be a hoax, and it was written by the student herself. And since then, there's been a lot talked about race on campus, and I think some of that is very positive, but we've seen a lot of resources go towards that fake hate crime, many more than have gone towards any conservative students who have also been, gotten their stuff vandalized and been threatened. But the allocation of resources has not been anywhere near the same as with the fake hate crime.
It is interesting, isn't it, that you guys have experienced actual threats, to your face threats. You've had actual displays vandalized. Your group and you as individuals have been threatened with bodily harm, and there's not really the slightest compassion for that whatsoever. Is it kind of one of those things where if you're conservative, you deserve this, that if you're conservative, you're part of the problem, so we have every right then to turn around and treat you badly?
Yeah, that's basically the narrative that a lot of students believe, that since they see the conservative ideology as threatening, that it doesn't matter how we're treated. One of the signs that was put up the other day in response to our display that explained why we were conservative was that conservatism is a front for white supremacy. And that's what these people really believe. And so they think that they are doing something noble and good in pushing us down and not letting us speak.
Well, it shows the real deterioration of critical thinking on college campuses. And this is why I go back to my first question. Shame on the university administrators for not at least requiring these progressive students to explain what they mean when they make such incendiary statements. We've reached a point now, if you're white, you're guilty of white privilege. It doesn't matter what you say or do. If you're a part of a conservative movement, you are now guilty of harboring white supremacists. If you voted for Donald Trump, you yourself must thereby be racist. These are all such juvenile, race-baiting kind of nonsense. And yet, have you had any encounter with anybody at the administration to talk about this?
I have. I've encountered most of the entire administration and had many conversations with them, and they've been sometimes helpful and sometimes not. And I was really disappointed in how my university handled the Ben Shapiro incident that we had. But there are certain people on campus, a few professors I know of, who are fighting back at this. We have a newly sponsored institute that's all based on going towards the two different sides discussing issues and civil discourse, which I think is amazing. But then yet again, this is charged as some white supremacist front by the students. So even when we try and do something like bipartisan conversation, it doesn't go over well with students.
Yeah, you make a great point about how bipartisanship, even perhaps more alarmingly than what we've talked about so far, if as a conservative, you try to reach out to the other side and people on the other side try to reach back, those people are immediately vilified, right? Talk a little bit about the university nixed Ben Shapiro, right? Because I'm not exactly sure why. What was their argument for that?
So it was around the same time, a year later, of the fake hate crime hoax that went on last year.
So a year later, they thought that having Ben Shapiro on campus would incinerate or cause to flare up the fake race hoax that you had from a year ago.
Yeah, and our president told me he thought that Ben Shapiro purposely tried to incite violence on campuses, and because of the race riots we'd had last year, that it was our campus was in a time of healing, and it wasn't appropriate that he come.
So let me guess, the president of the college did not give you a single instance in which Ben Shapiro actually tried to cite violence, did he?
No.
No. Well, you have a really interesting solution here. I'm very proud of you guys. You want to bring who to speak in May? Tell the audience who you're trying to recruit to campus for May.
In May, we're going to have Candace Owens here, which we're really excited about. And we actually just announced it today. So we've had no response yet from the administration. So hopefully everything goes well and she can still come. And we're very excited and hopefully going to get a big turnout for, she'll be talking about why big government policies are bad for the Black community. So we're very excited.
And Candace Owens, if you don't know, is Black. She's female. She's conservative. She's with Turning Point USA, a conservative organization. And better still, she was recently endorsed by Kanye West. Talk about that as we wind down.
Yeah. Kanye West just tweeted about her. He said, "I like the way Candace Owens thinks." And I think there's a big change coming in the Black community that I definitely think my group supports, and we're really excited to have Candace here talking about it.
Well, Kanye, of course, has taken a lot of heat for supporting her, and good for him for standing up. He knows. Yeah. It's funny how a rapper with radically different experiences than most of the white bread administrators who are trying to silence you has more respect for Candace than they do, evidently, right? So we'll see what they end up doing. But congratulations, Catherine. You've been a warrior on this and a reporter, and we're proud of you. To read more stories like this, like Catherine's, follow The College Fix on Twitter and Facebook. Catherine, thanks again for your time today. Time now for Talking Campus, our weekly discussion with members of the College Fix editorial team. Today, I am joined by College Fix assistant editor Daniel Payne for a conversation about the kinds of intolerance we are seeing at small liberal arts colleges like St. Olaf in Minnesota. Daniel, the Fix has done a fantastic job chronicling the St. Olaf scandal. I mean, we're talking multiple articles from multiple perspectives, each one worse than the last, seemingly. Tell us a little bit about this one we're looking at now. These poor campus Republican kids, they've been marginalized, they've been attacked, violence has been threatened. They actually put up a display to explain in a peaceful manner what they are, and they got attacked anyway. Talk about that for us.
Yeah, it's really kind of a perfect example of so much of what's wrong on these campuses. Conservatives are always being told that they're too threatening, that they make others feel unsafe, that they need to tone it back a bit. So these conservative students, took exactly that approach, whether it's right or not, and decided to just put up some interesting, informative signs on campus explaining why they're conservative, what they believe. That's all they did. It wasn't anything more than that. And even those signs were torn down by liberal students who I guess were just totally scandalized by even the presentation of conservative belief. So it's really an excellent example of moving the goalpost in that even when conservatives go out of their way on campus to be as accommodating and as thoughtful as possible in expressing their beliefs, they're still just going to get slammed for it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to phrase it. The more conservatives, I think mistakenly, try to accommodate themselves to the left's view of them, right? The left says we're threatening. The left says we bother them. The left says our presence on campus in any way makes some kids insecure. So let's do everything we can to appease that. And you see, I love the phrase you used, moving the goalpost. It's amazing, isn't it? How in 5 or 6 short years, we've actually moved to the position where there was a kind of grudging acceptance of non-progressive voices on campus to what you see now, where you have these radical instances of censorship and vandalization of posters and whatnot. And the universities don't seem terribly concerned. Talk a little bit about why St. Olaf, because we both know if this had happened to a liberal group, that they had a display torn down or something, the teams, the bias response teams would be all over it. How come they're not that interested with St. Olaf with protecting conservative rights?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, if this had been liberals, a liberal group that had, been treated this way, not only would the whole campus have been up in arms, but it probably would have been national news. The problem with the environment in a place like St. Olaf is. This is a small liberal arts college, very low student population comparative to state universities and larger private institutions, and it is such a thick and impenetrable bubble in so many ways. The small number of conservative students on these campuses are outnumbered, probably in a lot of cases more so than they are at larger universities, and so. That's why you're seeing this sort of problem, is that more so than so many other universities, the liberal environment there is so thick and is so pervasive that even just a few innocent signs hung on a wall are absolutely intolerable to the reigning ideology. So you might think that at what's this called, a small liberal arts college, that the environment would be a little more accepting, would be a little bit more tolerant of these kinds of viewpoints. But in many cases, it ends up being exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I agree. I taught at a small liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia for a few years. Did not end well. Was a school of about 1,000 kids. And moms and dads who think that these small, really, really expensive liberal arts colleges, 1,300 kids, are going to be a much safer environment, going to be a much more politically balanced environment, I think that's exactly the opposite is true. At the big state universities, right, the legislature usually has oversight over what happens at the university. There is state pressure. There are people watching what happens at the major colleges. No one's paying any attention to what goes on to these little liberal arts colleges. They are oftentimes self-governed. They've got a small little board. There's a handful of faculty compared to the hundreds and hundreds of faculty members you have at the major universities. And so consequently, they become much more insular. Like you said, more the bubble mentality. They become much more monolithic. And they really go to great pains, don't they? Both in terms of the student body they bring to campus and the teachers they hire, of freezing out voices that are anything other than conservatives. Be sure to stay up on all the latest news and information from the College Fix editors by joining us on all of our social media platforms. Daniel Payne, assistant editor of the College Fix, thank you so much for your time and insight today. As we've seen, there is almost an overrepresentation of small liberal arts colleges on the front page of organizations like the College Fix. For tiny little schools, they seem to be making a big impact in the culture wars, and very seldom for the good. I remember my time teaching at a small liberal arts college just outside of Philadelphia. Small college, about 1,000 students, and moms and dads sent their kids there for the small town feel, for the idea that maybe smaller teacher-student faculty ratios, more of a sense of community and family. All liberal arts colleges will try to sell you on that. We are family, right? There's so few of us we can look after our own. But that's the problem. I'll never forget my time at this college when one of my colleagues came up to me and said, "Oh, Dr. Pesta, I understand that you teach both sides of an issue when you teach your classes." And I was all excited. I thought this was a good thing. I said, "Well, yeah, I do. I try to give kids multiple perspectives." He stopped me in mid-sentence and he says, "Don't you know that our kids come to school so racist and bigoted and sexist that we must only teach them liberal perspectives?" Right? That was the argument. And all of these kids, 95% of these kids at this small college came from Philadelphia, one of the bluest states in the entire country, and yet that's still how the faculty viewed them. So be careful when you're choosing a college. The thing about small liberal arts colleges is there's no oversight. They're completely contained entities. If your kid is being mistreated at a major public university, there's always a default off campus to a state legislature who has some control, at least funding control, over those big colleges. But you send your kid to a really, really, really expensive small liberal arts college, and you're going to get a lot of what you see at St. Olaf over the last 2 years since the election of Donald Trump. The family vibe is gone now. And there are good kids and there are bad kids. Some kids, conservative, Christian, traditional kids, are being treated worse than redheaded stepchildren. And so unless you have the proper worldview, unless you have the right outlook, these schools are going to be in some ways worse for your kids than better. And that's the Final Fix. I'm Dr. Duke. We'll see you next time. For more videos and original articles, visit thecollegefix.com. And don't forget to like The College Fix on Facebook and follow on Twitter to receive your daily dose of right-minded news and commentary from across the nation.